Mom moved her friend and kids into my room, so I left to pay the bills at home, and now she's begging me to come back. Although living at home at the age of 23 wasn't exactly what I had planned for my life, it worked out for the most part. I wasn't simply lounging around playing video games and eating snacks. I was paying my rent, my mom's phone bill, and my power bill. I had my own place, home-cooked meals, and was able to concentrate on my freelance job without having to worry about large bills. I had even converted my room into a small studio for my content creation gigs, which I hoped would gain popularity soon. All in all, the arrangement was very fantastic. Everything was good until Kelly, my mom's best friend, moved in with her 2 children. I wasn't happy about it, but I could understand why. Kelly was going through a difficult divorce, and her husband was a total jerk, according to my mom, so they needed a place to stay, and our house was the best choice. They stayed in the guest room at first, and it wasn't a big deal. Sure, the kids were a little noisy, but I just closed my door and put on my headphones. I assumed it would only be temporary, only a few weeks until Kelly got back on her feet. I assumed that was the arrangement and didn't think much about it, but that quickly changed. The guest room wasn't very large, but it was sufficient for Kelly and her children to stay in for a time. I couldn't believe what I saw when I walked in one day after running some errands and saw something strange right away. My door was open and I could hear children laughing inside. My studio setup, including my pricey microphone, lighting, and camera, was pushed into a corner as if it didn't matter. Kelly's kids were running around like they owned the place. My desk chair was shifted, my bed was covered in toys, and one of the kids was on my computer. I was so shocked that I probably screamed, "What the hell is going on?" louder than I should have. "Calm your tits," my mother replied. "It's not a big deal. The kids needed more space, and your room is the biggest? It's only fair." My mother walked in and began berating me as if I was the one who was out of line. Fair? The room for which I was paying rent? She dismissed me as though I were being silly when I informed her that I wanted them out of my room right away, saying, "You're being selfish. They need to be comfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about comfort, it was about respect. My room wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a place where I worked. I had spent more than $3,000 on my studio setup, so I couldn't just put it in a corner and forget about it. My mother was not amenable to my explanations, saying, "They're just kids, they want to play on your computer, stop making such a fuss." I quickly put an end to that notion, saying, "They are not touching my equipment in any way, and if they do, I'm in serious trouble." Kelly then said, "Oh, come on. They're just curious, and you can't blame them. Maybe if you weren't so stiff, they'd listen to you." I was shocked. I wasn't uptight, I was just trying to protect the things I had worked so hard to acquire. I told Kelly bluntly that her children couldn't touch my belongings and that I would hold her accountable if they did. Kelly called me selfish, and my mother agreed. All of a sudden, I was the villain in my own house. The home became uncomfortable after that initial outburst, and I was shocked that my mom and Kelly were against me, especially because I was the one who was paying the rent. However, I assumed that after they calmed down, they would see how absurd this was. I tried to talk to my mom again the following day, explaining how important my studio equipment was to me both financially and professionally. Freelancing isn't just a pastime, it's my job, and I couldn't function without it, and it would take months or maybe years to replace it. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is unfair, Mom. You gave it away without even asking me, and I'm paying the rent for that room. You're being dramatic. It's my house, and I decide what happens in it, she retorted. Your house? I pay rent. I'm contributing here, not just squatting for free, I exclaimed in shock. The kids need space. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's room is full of her things. Besides, your room has all that fancy stuff, and they like it better. She shrugged as if it didn't matter. My sister's room was nearly as large as mine, and to be honest, she hardly used it because she was always out with her friends, but my mother wouldn't even entertain the possibility that my siblings, both of whom were 15, had perfectly good rooms. My brother's was smaller, but it was still large enough for 2 children. She claimed that the kids adore your room since it is cooler and that all of your glitzy devices add to their enjoyment. Fun? This wasn't about having fun. My room served as a place where I lived, worked, and unwinded, not as a play area for Kelly's children. What, are you going to replace anything if they break it? Because I can't afford to, I asked her. Oh, stop being so paranoid. They're kids, not monsters. If you just let them play, they'd probably leave your stuff alone, Kelly added at that point. Letting them play on my $3,000 setup? Are you serious? No way, I yelled. You're being selfish. This is a difficult time for us, and you're making it all about you. said Kelly, rolling her eyes. When I finally had enough, I turned to my mother and told her, I have to move my stuff out if they're staying in my room. I can't risk them damaging it. Where are you going to put it? There's no space anywhere else, she asked, laughing, really laughing. I raised my voice and said, so I'm just supposed to let them trash my stuff? How is that fair? Life is unfair. You're an adult, you should be able to handle a little inconvenience, my mother said, shaking her head. A minor annoyance? No, it was disrespectful to be evicted from my own room. I had paid rent for that space, and now I was not only unable to use it, but I was also prohibited from entering my room, which my mother claimed was their space now, and that I had no right to enter. I spent the next few days attempting to avoid being at home as much as possible, hanging out at coffee shops and working on my laptop, but it wasn't the same without my studio setup. I was falling behind on deadlines, my productivity plummeted, and my stress levels were through the sky. Look, I replied. I'll work out a deal. Let me move my setup into the guest room and they stay in my room. That way, I can continue working and they can have the space they need. This was my final attempt to talk sense into my mother's head. No, you'll just have to wait until Kelly gets back on her feet. The guest room is too small for all your stuff, she said without even considering it. How long will that take? I questioned impatiently. As long as it takes, she shrugged, adding, you don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles. I wanted to help Kelly and her children because I knew they were going through a difficult time, but this wasn't helping, it was enabling. Kelly wasn't paying anything to stay with us, and now I was essentially being forced out of my own life to make room for them. I couldn't believe this was happening. I heard Kelly moaning about me later that night in the kitchen, calling me immature and selfish, saying, he doesn't even understand how hard this is for us. He's just being a brat. He's always been stubborn. He'll get over it, my mother concurred. That was the last straw. I knew they didn't give a damn about me or my predicament. I was simply a paycheck to my mom and a barrier to Kelly and her children. They wouldn't listen, and they wouldn't change. Despite the odd turmoil, I loved living at home, it was affordable, and I got along with my brothers. However, I couldn't continue to live somewhere where I wasn't appreciated, so I started looking for rooms to rent the following day. After feeling like a stranger in my own house for days, I finally had enough and realized that respect was more important than the room anymore. I was trying to establish a future for myself, pay my bills, and pay my rent, but neither my mom nor Kelly seemed to care. They had decided that my needs came first, and I was sick of it. I thought that if I could show my mom how serious I was, she would finally listen. One evening, when it was just the two of us and my siblings were upstairs and Kelly was putting her kids to bed, I sat my mom down in the living room. Mom, I said calmly at the beginning, we need to talk. She looked at me wearily and said, what now? I said, I can't continue to live this way. You gave it away without asking, and it's unfair. I've been paying rent for that room, and now I can't even use it. We've been through this. It's temporary. Kelly and the kids are going through a hard time. You're young, and you can adapt, she said, leaning back on the couch with a sigh. You didn't ask me, you just decided that my room wasn't mine anymore, and now I can't even work since everything I own is packed up or pushed into a corner. That's not the point, I shot back. It's about respect, not about adjusting. She waved me away and remarked, you're being dramatic. This is my house, and I get to decide what happens in it. It seemed like a slap in the face each time she uttered that line. I remarked, if this is your house, then why am I paying rent? Perhaps I shouldn't be paying anything at all if you're going to treat me like a guest. Don't you dare pull that. You know I need your help with the bills, she said, her eyes narrowing. I yelled, that's not how this works. You can't take my money every month and then turn around and say I have no say. Then treat me like I matter. What do you want me to do? Throw Kelly and her kids out on the street? They have nowhere else to go, she said, giving me a crazy eyes look. But there are other options. They could move into one of my siblings' rooms or stay in the guest room. Hell, you could even rotate rooms so everyone takes turns sharing the space. But taking my room and locking me out? That's not okay, I said, shaking my head. Your room was the best option, my mother said, crossing her arms. Your brother and sister are too young to share their rooms, and the guest room is too small for 3 people. No, I shot back. It was the simplest solution. You dumped it on me because you didn't want to handle the hassle. The last word. I'll make this simple, I said, staring her in the eye. Either Kelly and the kids move out of my room, or I move out of the house. Those are your options. My irritation bubbled over at that moment. Surprised, she blinked. Don't be crazy. Where would you even go? She said. I informed her, if you don't respect me or the fact that I'm paying to live here, then I'll find somewhere else to live. I had already begun looking for rooms to rent. You're bluffing, you can't afford to move out, she sneered. Try me, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. My mom didn't take me seriously, which only strengthened my resolve, so I spent every free moment looking through rental listings, messaging landlords, and figuring out my budget. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could make it work if I cut back on non-essentials. The next few days were stressful. I didn't bring up the ultimatum again, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. At home, however, things deteriorated. Kelly's children had transformed my room into their own playground, and I was not even permitted to enter without someone yelling. One day, I attempted to get some books and a set of headphones that I had left behind, but Kelly stopped me. With her fists on her hips, she stood in the doorway and demanded, "What are you doing in here?" I tried to seem calm as I said, "I need my stuff." "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in whenever you want," she said, shaking her head. I was dumbfounded as I looked at her and said, "Are you serious? This is my room." "Not anymore," she stated in a cold tone. "You have to respect their personal space." With clenched teeth I answered, "I'm paying rent for this room, so I'll gather my belongings and go, but don't tell me to respect their space when no one respects mine." The irony almost made me giggle. My mom wasn't going to support me, and Kelly wasn't going to change, so I knew that if I wanted things to improve, I would have to take matters into my own hands. She muttered something under her breath and left, but the damage was already done. Relocating the landlord was friendly, the room was clean enough, and most importantly, I could set up my studio without worrying about kids touching my equipment. I found a room for rent a week after the ultimatum, which was within my budget. It was a small space in an older building, but it was mine. When I signed the lease, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness because I had to put myself first, even if it meant leaving behind the house I'd grown up in. I didn't tell my mom right away because I wanted to make sure everything was finalized before I dropped the bombshell. After I signed the lease for my new place, I knew I had to act quickly because if I gave my mom too much notice, she would find a way to make the move even more difficult. I carefully planned it out and told a few close friends about it, and 2 of them agreed to help me pack and move my belongings. One of them even offered to record everything on their phone, just in case things got ugly. I knew it would be difficult, especially with my mom and Kelly breathing down my neck, but I didn't care anymore. I wanted to give my mom one last chance to make amends, so I sat down with her the night before the move. "Mom," I began calmly. "I'm moving out tomorrow and I found a place to rent." Startled, she raised her head from her phone and said, "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I replied, nodding. "You didn't give me a lot of options." "You're overreacting. This whole thing is temporary." "You're leaving over nothing," she said, rolling her eyes. I firmly stated, "It's not nothing. You treated me like a disposable object, gave away my room, locked me out, and told me I had no say in the matter. You know I need your rent money to keep this house running. If you leave, how am I supposed to pay the bills?" She groaned as if I were wearing her out. "You made it obvious that this isn't my house. You stated that it's your house, your rules." "Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stay here," I answered, pushing off a twinge of remorse. "So you're just going to leave us high and dry?" She glared at me. I shrugged and said, "I don't owe you anything. You can ask Kelly, or her husband, since they're still married, to start paying the rent." I decided to leave after she gave me a chilly glance and returned to her phone without saying anything else. My friends arrived early the following day with a rented van and a few cars, and we were prepared to finish everything as soon as possible. I had previously packed the majority of my belongings into boxes, but I still needed to move my studio setup out of my old room. The kids were running around the living room, and Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when we arrived at the house. She looked at me suspiciously as soon as I entered. She narrowed her eyes and questioned, "What's going on?" "I'm leaving," I said plainly. "Really? You're leaving because of this?" "That's pathetic," she said, raising her eyebrows. Ignoring her, I went upstairs to my room, or what had been my room, and when I opened the door, I was nearly sickened by what I saw. My desk was cluttered with random items, my computer, microphone, and camera were crammed into a corner, and they appeared to have been neglected for weeks. "Start recording," I said, turning to one of my buddies. As I gently started packing away my equipment, he took out his phone and started shooting, and Kelly must have recognized what was going on because she walked upstairs and began to yell. "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in here and start taking stuff," she yelled. "It's my stuff, Kelly. I paid for it, and I'm taking it with me," I said, turning to face her while maintaining my composure. "You're being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space," she said, crossing her arms. "This isn't a tantrum," I responded steadily. "This is me defending myself. You and my mother have treated me as though I'm unimportant, and I'm over it." My mom came upstairs to see what was going on, and when she saw the empty room, she flipped out. She started screaming again, but I ignored her and continued packing, and my friends helped me load everything into the van while one of them continued to film, in case Kelly or my mom tried to pull something. She said, her voice trembling with rage, "You're really leaving us just because you didn't get your way?" I gave her a direct look and said, "I'm leaving because you didn't respect me. You made it clear that I'm not a priority here, so I'm making myself a priority. I paid rent for this room, and you gave it away without even asking." "Don't. I've made my decision," I said, holding up a hand as she opened her lips to disagree. Kelly stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, gazing at me as I carried the last box out to the van. "Good luck out there," she murmured cynically, "because when things get tough, you'll realize how selfish you've been." I simply got into the van and drove off with my companions without even bothering to answer. My mom was outraged and accused me of being selfish and thoughtless for leaving her in a difficult situation, saying that I was quitting the family and leaving her to handle the bills alone. That night, after I had moved into my new house and begun unpacking, my phone exploded with texts from her. One text said, "I can't believe you'd do this to me after everything I've done for you. You've always been so selfish." She had made her decisions, and now I was making mine, so I typed up a response but erased it since I didn't owe her an explanation. As soon as I moved into my new home, I was relieved that there would be no more arguments, disrespect, or, most importantly, that I didn't matter. My new room was smaller, and the building wasn't exactly the best, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I started by unpacking my studio gear and carefully arranging it in my room's corner. I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in weeks. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Trips of guilt. The following morning, my mom began bombarding my phone with messages, asking whether I had paid the rent for the month. When I told her that I wasn't paying because I had moved out, she became furious. She texted, "You owe me for the remainder of this month, and you haven't even reached the 25th yet." I rolled my eyes and said, "No, I don't. You can ask Kelly to pay the rent because I'm not living there anymore. Kelly doesn't have money to pay rent. You know that. You're leaving me to handle everything on my own, and I can't afford it," she said almost immediately. I replied by text, "That's not my problem. You stated clearly that it's your house and your rules. Now it's your bills and your responsibility." That response infuriated her, and she began accusing me of being ungrateful, selfish, and immature, saying that my departure was tearing the family apart. Initially, the guilt began to seep in, but I reminded myself of why I had left in the first place. My mom had treated me like a throwaway object, so why should I feel guilty about prioritizing myself? I had always contributed financially, and I knew my efforts had made a significant impact. My mom sent me lengthy, meandering texts about how I was ruining things the following week, and the guilt trips escalated into fury. "Everyone in the family is asking why you left, and I don't know what to tell them." One text said. It was amazing how much better I felt without all the chaos and negativity weighing me down, so I didn't bother responding because I knew that anything I said would only make things worse. Instead, I concentrated on getting settled in my new home, catching up on work, and getting my studio back up and running. My sister contacted me unexpectedly a few days later, and since I hadn't heard from her since I moved out, I assumed she wanted to check in. However, as soon as I answered, I knew she had other plans. She skipped the small conversation and exclaimed, "Mom is really upset. She says you're not paying rent this month, and now she's freaking out about the bills." I said calmly, "I'm not living there anymore. Why should I pay rent for a place I'm not living in?" My sister countered, "But you know she can't afford it without you. Why stop now? You've always helped out." I told her straight out. Because she didn't respect me. She gave away my room, locked me out, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm enough of being taken advantage of. It's not that easy. Mom is just trying to help, and Kelly is going through a lot, my sister groaned. I replied, "I understand that, but why does assisting Kelly mean that I'm being taken advantage of? I paid the rent for that room, so I had every right to keep it." My sister added pathetically, "She's just stressed out and didn't mean to screw you over." I retorted, "So am I, but nobody gave a damn when I was being forced out of my own room." I could tell she was stuck in the middle, but I wasn't going to allow her shame me into changing my opinion, so I hung up after we spoke for a few more minutes, largely about her school-related issues. A final stunt. My mother began to cut off her texts as the days passed. I believe she understood I wouldn't back down, but she did one more thing that made me glad I had left. I received a text message one morning saying, "Hey, I heard about the drama with your mom. Are you okay?" From a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. I asked them what they were talking about, confused, and they sent me a screenshot of one of my mom's Facebook posts. She portrayed me as the bad guy in it, saying that I had abandoned her and the family when they were in need, omitting the part where she gave away my room, of course, and making it seem as though I had departed out of pure resentment. I was incensed. Arguing with me in private was one thing, but sharing our private problems on the internet? That was too much. I didn't reply to the post because I thought it wasn't worth the trouble. If she had to play the victim, then let her. I knew the truth, and so did the people who really mattered. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I limit the conversation to neutral subjects and keep it brief. I've learned to set boundaries and am no longer allowing her to guilt trip me. Now, a month later, I'm completely settled in my new place, my work is back on track, my stress levels are significantly lower, and I'm finally beginning to feel like myself again. If my mom couldn't give me the respect I deserve, I had to find it somewhere. Moving out was the best thing I could have done for myself, and I'm not looking back. Do I feel awful about leaving? Sometimes. Yes, it's terrible that things had to end this way, but I don't regret my choice. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.